All right, just a quick moment of your time before the cast. Check out Wolfman's Got Narc, Scary Jersey Guy channel, as well as General Laws channel, of course. Please make sure you are subscribed to both and click that notification bell. Very important. Also, remember to like or dislike this cast too. Let us know. Please leave us feedback by adding a comment. If you want to listen to previous episodes on the go, then check out anchor.fm/realbaddudescast. Remember, that's too easy. Or search Real Bad Dudes Cast on your favorite music or podcast app. So make sure to subscribe to that as well. All right, on with the podcast.
This is the Real Bad Dudes Cast.
Which I want to introduce a new thing where we review episodes of any anthology show. So
It's anthology time.
Today, myself, Rage Kill, and Wolfman are going to be taking a look at Vanishing Act, episode 21 of season 2 of The Outer Limits Reimagining. This is a time travel episode, one with a rather interesting / hard SF twist to it. Essentially, it stars one John Cryer, who I never heard of outside of this particular episode, but evidently is a famous actor. He plays the character Trevor McPhee. The episode begins in 1950. Trevor McPhee is sitting with his wife, and he's basically lamenting not having a lot of money, and he basically just says, you know what, screw it, I'm going to go out and get some champagne because we're going to actually celebrate, goddammit. So he drives out to go get some champagne, only to get sucked up by aliens. It's just a quick flash, and then he wakes up in his rusted out car. Because this is a time travel episode, and there are some aliens that keep trawling him 10 years into the future. Basically, he only experiences about 3 or 4 days in the episode, but for the rest of the world, it's about 40 years. And the whole crux of the episode is him dealing with the time changes, and the rest of the characters try to figure out why he's traveling into the future.
Yeah.
yep.
Now the sad thing is I almost, when you were like, and he just does this, I almost blurted out, it's just a jump to the left. You want to go, Ragey?
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
Reginald.
So he goes talk to his wife. She's like, "Where have you been?" And he's like, I
Up
must
your
have
ass."
blacked out." Whoa. God, this episode kind of ended up being a little deep.
How?
On how quickly time can pass. Missing on events. I mean, it really sucks for him because like just missing out on all these events and stuff, and then it kind of makes you think of. At least I kind of thought of my own life. I'm like, oh my god, I'm this age and there's so much stuff I haven't done yet. I don't know. This episode kind of just hit home in a way. It was just like, oh my god, how quick stuff's going by for him.
Yeah, I think this is sort of like a parable of that concept that when you're not paying attention, time can indeed leave you behind. And I think it's a very mature episode. It's not particularly campy. The acting is quite well done all around. John Cryer actually puts in a great performance. Now, evidently, he's some sort of comedic actor, well known for the 2.5 Men television series. I've never actually seen that show, so I couldn't tell you one way or the other. Now, overall, the side characters are handled quite well, and there's a number of nice little details in the background that will become more important as the episode progresses. The wife character is, of course, very maturely done. She's not really annoying. She's not really dumb. She's not really passive. John Cryer's character can, of course, really picks up on a lot of the stuff pretty fast.
It's kind of reminded me of like the last half of the movie Click.
Yeah, there is a bit to that as well. Not that anyone remembers Click these days. One thing that I particularly liked a great deal was there's a character introduced at the very beginning of the episode that picks up the John Cryer character after he initially makes his first trip through time. He's driving a pickup truck and has a bunch of comic books in the cab of the truck, and he seems like a fairly nice guy. And then eventually, as the timeline progresses, he ends up marrying the Cryer character's wife. But instead of them being at odds against each other, this is something I really like because TV really does not get relationships right. They really make them very infantile, very shallow in many respects, but that character actually befriends the Cryer character and actually tries to help him out to stop him from crawling through time. And I thought that was really quite touching. The whole episode was actually kind of touching in many instances.
Right.
It's actually kind of an interesting thing to note, though, is it's one of those episodes and one of those time travel things where the further you get away from the 1950s, the crappier everything is. That's kind of scary. Although I think today, depending on where you live, we've kind of reconverged with a much more cleaner time than the 80s and early 90s was.
It's kind of funny because they definitely went to the Back to the Future school of aging his wife, but they had to do it for theatrics, obviously.
When it comes to age makeup, there's only so much you can actually do, especially on a TV show budget. And one of the big problems with aging, though, is well, old people don't necessarily look that bad. You know, some people actually age a lot better, but they got to
Right.
but they got to get the point across, though. It's like this person is older if they look kind of the same. It's kind of like with Patrick Stewart. If you
They
said
came from the 50s. It's from chain smoking and whatnot.
I guess you could say that, but it's kind of like with Patrick Stewart. You know, if you took Patrick Stewart from 1982 and transported him into 2022, he'd look pretty much the same. Unfortunately, it's like, wait, he's from the past.
I was glad this had a happy ending because I thought they were gonna go the route where he was just screwed, and he'd end up going to like the grave of his wife and son. And
That could easily have happened. For those who have never seen an episode of The Outer Limits, the reimagined version is very, shall we say, dark. Most episodes have a sad ending, but with this one, by the time he makes it to the 1990s, one of the scenes that I remember that kind of fondly is during one of his time travel episodes, he actually time travels in a bathroom, and so he wakes up in the 1980s and it's a nightclub, and the first thing he sees in the 80s is somebody snorting coke.
Sounds about right.
And one of my favorite lines, though, is from his son, because he ends up fathering a son, but it's the other guy who actually ends up raising him. And so he
Sounds
walks
about
out,
right.
and so he walks out into the nightclub, and the son comes in, and the guy that got to play the son looks a lot like John Cryer, and even kind of sounds like him too.
right.
And he ends up growing a mustache just like him. But he comes out, it's like, it's the 1980s. I kind of, for some reason, I remembered him like dancing around with an 80s dance, but he doesn't actually do that.
I thought the 70s was more hilarious because where he leads like to the hustle, do 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 do.
Yeah, but see, that's a confusing thing though. Since it's 1980, they're still playing. That's not yet dead. So it can confuse you, but the son actually does say it's the 1980s.
Yeah, but they did play that type of shit in the discos.
And I really found Do the Hustle quite funny as well. I mean, you know what's funny though? They still kind of play that, or at least when I was a kid, they still played that.
Right. Wolfman, what are your thoughts on this episode?
My thoughts on the episode is kind of like what what Lot said. This was pretty dark. This series, I used to call it the Outer Tales from the Crypt because of how dark it was.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like this had some serious shit to it. And this particular episode, in and of itself, the whole thing behind the episode was to just show that time is fleeting, and no matter what path you are on, it can anything can change in a second, and that's pretty much what it went to explore. I thought it was a pretty good episode. And the makeup work was pretty well done. The acting was great as well, and I mean, it's pretty much a real staple for the show in and of itself. I mean, let's face it, after the Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone went off the air after Rod Sterling died, you weren't going to get another show like this. And it was the same thing with Alfred Hitchcock's Presents. Once he died, you weren't going to find something like that anymore. Outer Limits at least tried, and that it was a nice way to fill the void. It was to me, Outer Limits was like something that like kids who grew up on Are You Afraid of the Dark, they grew up, and then when they were teenagers, they watched The Outer Limits.
Couldn't have said it better
What's
myself.
actually kind of amusing though is I must have been fairly advanced as a kid because I watched that. I never watched Are You Afraid of the Dark because I thought it was lame. But Outer Limits I watched all the time. So yeah.
No.
Are You Afraid of the Dark was the shit.
Yeah, there's some episodes that are cheesy, but there's actually some really good, well done episodes of that show.
As a kid, I just couldn't get into it. That was a Nickelodeon thing, right?
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
Nickelodeon was like the thing to do.
This is the spoiler part, but for those of you who don't watch the episode, we'll tell you how it actually ends. Now, ultimately, what ended up happening to the guy, it's actually a hard science fiction concept of wormholes. It basically, what you got is an alien
It
that,
was
like,
wormholes from alien worms.
yes,
Uh,
pretty much. It's like non-evil Gould, and they use wormholes to travel through space and time. And like with the prophets from Deep Space Nine, they don't have a linear existence. John Cryer is of Bajor. And so, of course, it's like once it's explained to them, like, wait, we got time. We don't know how the ball game ends. And that's like, oh, shit. I'm sorry. We'll send it back. And he gets sent back. Now, there are some unfortunate implications, as is always the case when it comes to time travel. Uh, for him, it's only been a couple of days, so it's not that big of an adjustment. However, the kid will not exist because the kid was brought about because of time travel.
All he has to do is mark on
Uh,
the calendar, you know,
yeah, but he's
January
not going to
1st,
do that though.
1960, make whoopee with wife to create son.
He's probably not going to remember that, and it's probably not going to because with all the change. Remember, he's got 10 years. He's got 10 years. He's got his life back, so he's not going to be trolled forward 10 years, and he's probably not going to do the same thing unless he's like. It's been kind of hard to explain. No, we cannot have sex, but once every 10 years, that's not going to work. He's not fucking Spock. But the fact is, uh, the kid's not going to exist, or at least not in that form. The life, and it was a long life too, between the wife and the other character. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And there's no way to know what's going to happen to that guy.
Well,
But that's the problem with time travel. You never really know what the changes are all going to be.
well, between
And
1980 and 1990, she learned psychology to try and save him.
yeah, that's not
I
going to
mean
happen either.
hypnosis, whatever. Yeah.
It was some sort of made up psychology that doesn't exist. But the fact is, the timeline is completely different. Anytime you change one event, you never know. And I think that's one of the things that the TV show is trying to explain as well. Like, don't worry about small events because you don't know that if you change one, it might actually get worse.
Hmm.
Because, like, the three of us meeting were all by chance. You change one event, we don't meet. You, Rage Kill, and I met because I played a game of Duke Nukem 3D on Steam with him, and then Wolfman and Rage met from a Friday the 13th game. So imagine that, if you will. Like, what if Friday the 13th had never been made? What if you hadn't been on that night? What if you'd chosen to not speak that night?
That's the big question. Yeah.
It's like all these events are interconnected in time. Better
Gotta
collect
go
the clocks.
back in time. Oh, sorry.
You got to run around and collect clocks, otherwise the time will break.
Watch out
So,
for the hula hoop girls. Well,
but
the closing narration of the episode was really good. It was like, life is at best an uncertain path. Perhaps we should be grateful with what we have, for even these riches may disappear along the way.
You so fucking read that. You didn't even memorize the episode, you bastard.
well, you know what? It still worked. It's true. Okay, so at the end of the day, I fully, wholeheartedly recommend this episode. This is a good starting point for Outer Limits. Most of the Outer Limits episodes are not interconnected in any way. Some are, and they make sort of like broad-based story arcs. But this one is just, you can jump right into it. You don't need any prior continuity whatsoever. And it is definitely well worth watching. I hadn't seen this episode in at least 5 years. And then 5 years before that viewing, I hadn't seen it in about 20. So it had still stuck with me.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say to any viewers that haven't seen the 90s Outer Limits, I would say if you've at least watched Black Mirror, then yeah, you'll definitely dig 90s Outer Limits. And if you've only seen 90s Outer Limits, definitely dig Black Mirror. I think they're both sort of have a lot of similar, kind of sort of beats to them. But yeah, this episode was great. And it's an episode that makes you think, and which is what good sci-fi should do. So yeah, check it out, Wolfman. excellent episode.
It's definitely. I mean, it's worth watching the whole series if you're into that sort of thing. If you're into weird shit like Twilight Zone, or like I said, Tales from the Crypt, anything like that, or Alfred Hitchcock movies, even anything in that range, it's worth checking out because they're done pretty well. These were done very competently, and at the very least for this series, The Outer Limits especially, it's structured in a way where you don't have to watch the entire show to get what's going on. You can pick up any episode at any time and get into it. And I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that this episode is like leaps and bounds ahead of other episodes because they're all done very well.
Mhm.
But I would say I recommend the whole series if you're into that sort of thing.
And so I am General Utz, wishing you good Outer Limits and good monsters.
Just don't look. Just don't look.
Or whatever makes you happy.
Yeah,
There you
black-
go.
Well, no, it's just the way that the lot said monsters.
Were you
I know.
trying
It's just
to-
like he's
when
like
you
it's
said-
monsters.
Yeah, when you said monster, you're talking about that weird anthology one I was telling you about the other day.
Yes, that popped into my mind. So
Just don't look. Just don't look.
Yeah, there was some like anthology show about monsters called Monsters, I think, and all I can remember from it is the intro because I used to watch it as a kid, and I shared the intro with lots, and it was like terrible acting of people wearing monster makeup. Like,
it's
"Get
something,
ready, the
all
show's
right.
almost done." And that concludes the first episode of Anthology Time. Here is a bonus clip of us talking about Nickelodeon in the '90s.
When I was a kid, like everybody went home and watched Nickelodeon.
Same here.
There was Clarissa Explains It All. There was Eureka's Castle. Then you had Hey Dude, and then you had Salute Your Shorts. You got to fit in some Double Dare at some point. We had an awesome lineup on TV back in the day.
I guess by the time the 90s rolled around, when I was a kid, they didn't really have all that because, to be honest, I was much more into Cartoon Network, much less into the kid programming that Nickelodeon had.
Yeah, on your end when you were growing up, you definitely had Cartoon Network, and you had shit like Dexter's Laboratory and Powerpuff Girls. You know the Samurai, what the fuck ever, and
Samurai Hank.
it's the whole notion of time and how it passes you by. It was the same thing with when the Cartoon Network generation got big. When I saw Johnny Bravo, I'm like, what the fuck is this nonsense? And meanwhile, I'm tuning in to Yippee Ti Yay, and then watching those arcade games, those game shows where they played video games and the kids sucked ass, and you're just sitting there going, what the fuck is wrong with you? I can play Galaga better than that. It's just it's that's the point of the time right there and how it passes you by, and it especially shines through with the episode when he's going through all the different eras and nothing makes sense to him. That's how I felt.
Yeah, I can feel that way, but then again, for me, I always kind of stuck with what I liked. So it's like when the kids got the new crap, I just turned off the TV. I'm reminded of something hilarious my grandfather has said over the years. When the Beatles came on, I turned the radio off.
Well, yeah, it's because you got to, make room for the Rolling Stones, man.